Hello, you're listening to On Israel in Al Monitor. I am Ben Caspit from Tel Aviv. Naftali Bennett's government has completed its first 100-day run in fairly reasonable shape. Considering this was a government that no one in Israel believed could ever be formed, let alone survive for more than a month or two, one might even say it's been successful so far. With the help of Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman, Bennett won preliminary Knesset approval for the state budget. He is orchestrating nationwide booster vaccination drive, rebuilding Israeli foreign relations, and has already met with King Abdullah in Jordan, President Biden in Washington, and President Assisi in Egypt. But he is not performing well in the polls despite these achievements. The burden of proof on his shoulders is made heavier by the shaming and delegitimization campaigns being mounted by Benjamin Netanyahu's many followers on the political right, as well as ultra-Orthodox voters and some of Bennett's Yamina party voters who view the government he has formed with leftists and Arabs as bordering on treason. We will discuss the state of the Bennett-Lapid government as it marks its first 100 days with our On Israel guest, the political correspondent of Israel's top-rated Channel 12 News, Dana Weiss. Weiss, a lawyer by training, has been covering Israel's premiership as closely as possible for the past 2 decades. We'll talk with her about the lifespan of the new government. We'll ask whether Naftali Bennett can reinvent himself and create a voter base from scratch. And we'll examine the intriguing question of what Benjamin Netanyahu could do to bring Bennett down and return to the place he sees as his natural habitat, the Prime Minister's office. Dana Weiss joins us right after this short break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, On Israel with Ben Caspit, and On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Now, I am very happy to say hello to my friend and colleague, Channel 12's diplomatic correspondent and senior analyst, Dana Weiss. Shalom, Dana.
Shalom, Ben.
Thank you for joining us here in On Israel in Al Monitor. And let's
thank you for having me.
Yes, straight dive into business. And I'll ask you the following. Prime Minister Bennett has just made it onto Time Magazine's 2021 list of the 100 most influential people in the world, but he is not the first nor the last Israeli Prime Minister to do so. What makes this special is the identity of the man who wrote Time's endorsement of Bennett, none other than the leader of Israel's Arab Islamist party, Knesset member Mahmoud Abbas, whose Ram party has become the first Arab party to ever join an Israeli government. To what extent do you view this as historically significant? Is it perhaps maybe a temporary constellation that will fade the minute Israel and Hamas engage in their next round of fighting?
Well, that's really a great point. I think what comes to mind is that in Israeli politics, and actually in the region itself, in the Middle East, the best thing to say is expect the unexpected. and never say never, because it's almost science fiction to think that this could have happened, that the leader of the extreme right party, Naftali Bennett, who was the head of the settlers, and, really to the right of Netanyahu, would be endorsed by someone who was, until the last round of elections, almost an outcast in Israeli politics, certainly for any right-wing party that thought about forming a government. So here we are seeing this alliance, which couldn't have happened half a year ago. And if you'd ask me, and I'm sure you would say the same answer, half a year ago, do we think it's impossible? We would say, no, you're kidding. That's something we'll never see. So the fact that Bennett was endorsed by Abbas is certainly the big story about this government. And, McLuhan said that the medium is the message. I think this is the case. The message of this government is, it's everything you couldn't think would happen in Israeli politics is happening. Here we have a leader, a prime minister, who 2 years ago was looking for a new career after he couldn't pass the threshold and was out of Knesset. And here he is sitting as prime minister. And we also have the extreme left party, Meretz, sitting with a right-wing party. So everything is unaccepted and unimaginable, but it's happening.
It's like they said the bastards are rewriting the rules, but they didn't alert anyone, including, by the way, former Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I will ask you in a short while about this weird government. I want to ask you about the stability. We are now issuing this podcast is special for 100 years of the Bennett government, and the budget has made it through its first reading and seems set for final approval in November. Does that mean, in your opinion, Dana Weiss, that the government will survive at least until 2023, or do you see other developments that might destabilize it, because we are finally in the bottom line, we're in the Middle East and in Israel?
Well, the budget is a big issue, and it's certainly a marker. And I know for a fact that even in the White House, they were very concerned and thought about postponing Bennett's visit to the White House and meeting President Biden till after the budget. But when they got assertions and heard that it's going to pass, they understood that this meant that this government is here to stay. We never say never, as I told you, in Israeli politics, but certainly the fact that they managed to secure a budget, and it seems like they're going to pass it in the Knesset, have final approval, there would be no reason and no way to break up this coalition. None of the parties would have an interest to do so, and it would be very hard for the opposition to try and tempt someone out of this government. So certainly it is going to be cementing this government for the foreseeing future till 2023, and that gives Bennett leverage over his partners, and it certainly will stir some heat in the Likud party and in the opposition. But you have to remember that the previous government and that strange coalition between Netanyahu and Gantz fell because of the budget, and Israel actually worked without a budget for over 2 years. So it's good for the country, and it's also good for politics. So I think these two together can give us some kind of political stability. And for Israel, 2 years of stability is a long time.
And this is exactly what I want to talk with you next about the stability. Everyone keeps saying that the government coalition is very fragile. On the other hand, there is a theory that says that the government's very strength stems from the weakness. Almost all of its components have no choice but to stick it out because the alternative is far worse. Even the fate of Mansour Abbas depends on the fate of this government. How do you see this issue, and to what extent do you think something like a clash with Gaza could dismantle the government?
I think that's a very interesting point, because Abbas
the leader of the Muslim party, has come up with a new formula. Up to this round of election, usually the Arab representatives were always about two issues. They were about social issues of the Arab population, but they were also raising a higher flag about the conflict and about being and representing the Palestinian issue in the government. And that made it very hard for them to join any coalition. Abbas has said, I'm changing things. We're not going to solve the Palestinian issue now, certainly not with this government. So instead of sitting from the outside, it's time that the Arabs take a seat around the table where decisions are made and start influencing their day-to-day life. And we've just heard a prominent leader from that party in an interview yesterday on our channel saying, listen, we're not going to make any progress if we sit in the opposition. And Gaza is not a problem that's going away. So even if we wait for the next government, they're going to be faced with Gaza. He's basically said, don't think we're going to tear this government apart because issues such as Gaza. We want peace, we understand that, but we want to take care of our people first. And I think it's true, as you mentioned, for every component of this government. Think about the Minister of Health, Nitzan Horowitz, who's very busy these days with the COVID, obviously. But this is a guy who was the leader of a very small left-wing party who never dreamt of being a minister. He almost accepted the fact that he will always sit in the opposition in his political career. And here he is sitting in this prominent position in the government. Think about our Minister of Transportation, Merav Michaeli, who basically managed to save her Labour Party from being, wiped of the political maps. She didn't even dream of being a minister, not alone a cabinet minister, and a very prominent minister. So everyone in this government knows that nothing is waiting for him on the outside, and it's best to stick together. And that is a very powerful power in politics.
Let's talk about Prime Minister Bennett. Some of Bennett's success so far stems from his extraordinary reception in Washington. I think you've been there. His achievement in restoring relations with Jordan and its monarch, and the warm welcome he was given by Egyptian President Sisi. How do you explain this? Did there a personal dislike of Netanyahu turn all these leaders into Bennett fans despite his religious right-wing ideology that places him to the right of Netanyahu?
I think that's exactly the point. I mean, that's the starter. The starter is that he is not Netanyahu. And I think this administration has gone out of his way to make everyone understand that they prefer anyone else but Netanyahu, especially with the fact that they have to deal with Iran and maybe going back to the deal. And they remember what Netanyahu, former Prime Minister Netanyahu did to Obama. And I want to remind you and our listeners, of course, that President Biden was there as vice president. So he knows firsthand what it means to deal with Netanyahu. And I think they look at this government as an interesting experiment. And I think they can understand this, and they can appreciate the fact that they're going for a different kind of government that is a unity government that is bringing all these different people to the table. So I think for Biden, Bennett is interesting. I think he understands he can do business with him. I think he understands it's not Netanyahu, and I think he understands it's a better partner, given the fact that he has to negotiate with Iran or come up with some kind of solution to Iran, and he can rely on Naftali Bennett. Not that Naftali Bennett won't take care of Israel's interests, but he's not looking for a fight with the administration. Now, once President Biden gives the endorsement to Naftali Bennett, then Sisi understands that, as usual, if he wants to get things from Washington, it's always good to have good relations with the person sitting in Balfour Street in Jerusalem, the prime minister. So it's like kind of a domino effect. And I think, for one thing, for 12 years, the Israeli public has been given the notion that it's either Netanyahu or the end of the state of Israel. No one can do the job better than Netanyahu. He ran on a campaign saying that he's a leader from a different league. He had the billboards with him shaking hands with Prime President Trump and him shaking hands with Putin to say that no one else can play the international league. And here we see Bennett playing the international league. And as I mentioned, Trump, again, we have to remember the fact that Netanyahu aligned with Trump and was all in on Team Trump is a key factor when President Biden looks at Naftali Bennett. He knows he's not going to do the same. He knows that he wants to reach for bipartisan, he goes back to the bipartisan policy in the American public and American politics. So it's not Netanyahu, it's not Trump's friend, it's Naftali Bennett. He's a young leader. It's easier to do business with him. He's coming with a different kind of government, and it's something they want to bet on.
I did not plan to ask you this, but it's relatively new. I don't know if you have had a chance to see it yet, because talking about Netanyahu, they just uploaded a short video of the former prime minister mocking Prime Minister Bennett and President Biden, hinting that Bennett was so successful in Washington that the president actually fell asleep. I don't think that Netanyahu is aware to the extent of the damage he can cause to himself in such a video.
Yes, but I think, Netanyahu...
It's embarrassing, I know.
Yeah. I don't think
he plans to
the United States bases its policies on videos that you see here in Israel.
Thank God for this.
But I understand that what?
Thank God for this. Yes.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little about Benny Gantz. In an interview he gave Foreign Policy magazine last week, the defense minister presented a stand that was significantly different than Bennett's position on the Iran deal, basically saying Israel could accept a return to the agreement with Iran. Do you think we are seeing a substantive disagreement, or simply a tactical maneuver? And to what extent is Gantz playing a political game? People are saying that the only one who could realistically bring down the Bennett government is Gantz if he realigns himself with Netanyahu.
Benny Gantz is really the interesting story, because he's having a hard time to swallow this government. He's looking at this government and he's saying to himself, why do I have to sit under Naftali Bennett? And why do I have to take all this kind of government with it's a big government, with a lot of ministers. And his former partner, Yair Lapid, is going to be prime minister after Naftali Bennett. And he remembers the hard time he got from Yair Lapid when he went for a unity government with Netanyahu. So he's saying to himself, why do I have to sit here and see how they turned around on all the promises? Well, when I did that, they gave me such a hard time. And I think he's convincing himself that he has an alternative, that he can really form a government with Netanyahu. But hey, he's the one who knows what it means to trust Netanyahu's promises. He was there. He believed in Netanyahu. He paid a very high political price for it, and he saw where it got him. But Benny Gantz is going around very, he's unhappy, and he's showing everyone this unhappiness. When it comes to closed doors and when it comes to the defense issues, I understand they're working very well together. And I think he's also working well with Yair Lapid when it comes to closed doors. But Benny Gantz is sure he could have been prime minister. And I think this is something that is very hard for him to swallow. As for the deal, I know for a fact that at the end of the day, Israel's policy is not, the new policy is not no deal like Netanyahu, saying any deal is a bad deal. That's it. It's better off without a deal. I think the policy that Naftali Bennett and his government are now trying to pursue with the Americans is going back to the deal is bad. But if you come up with a better deal, a much more, that looks for the future and takes care of all our concerns or regional concerns or the fact that it really will bind Iranians to the promise, there's something to talk about. But if you're not coming up with a deal, then we need to talk about what's your plan B. So I think Gantz went ahead and talked about a better deal. And I think it's also what Bennett says in closed rooms. He wouldn't say it outside.
So there is no real crisis between these two. We are approaching the final questions. I want to ask you about Naftali Bennett, that despite his relative achievements, he does not seem to be filling the prime minister's shoes yet. Most Israelis don't see him as a legitimate leader, especially since Yamina party has only got 7 mandates and one of them quit. Do you think he can grow? Can he create a new voter base? Is he eyeing the political center, and can he mold his ideologies to fit that slot? Do you see him establishing a new broader based party, not just of religious right-wing voters?
You know, I was asking myself that, and then I reminded myself that he's the guy who was sure not only that he can be prime minister, but that he has to be prime minister and he will be prime minister. Now, he was saying that when he had 6 seats, 10 seats, 12 seats, when he got 4 seats, he's never lost sight of the fact that he believes that he should be prime minister. And here he is, sitting in the prime minister's office. So even if after 2 years, he won't have voters to get in there for another 4 years or another term, he's achieved his goal. He's going down in the history book as the prime minister of Israel. So I think he is wisely behaving in the fact that he's saying, I'm not thinking about politics now. I'm thinking about being the best prime minister I can be. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that might get me another term. Now, he says he wants to go ahead with no drama. He wants his term to be a no drama term. He wants his term to be about working, about, getting things done, about working for the public, about making the right decisions without politics. It's something that we haven't seen in a while. And, we'll have to see what the public says about it. But at the end of the day, this is the guy who's sitting in the prime minister's office with only 6 seats, and he's already achieved that. So,
the guy has made it, and I totally agree with you. And it's not only this, he's the first one, and you will not be able to take it from him. The first religious yarmulke wearing Israeli that is a prime minister, and it's a real history.
Yes, and it reminds me that I think in Netanyahu's 4th term, one of his aides told him, look, don't think about your next term. Just wake up in the morning and think how you're going to be the best prime minister that you can and look for the center of the Israelis. And if you do that, you will have another term because you will be a good prime minister, and 2, you will go down in the history books as a great prime minister. But if you sit in that seat and always think about survival, you're not going to do your job right. At the end of the day, the public will not be there for you. So maybe this is something that Naftali Bennett is trying to prove otherwise, but this is all a big experiment. We're going to have to see how it works out.
A few words about Netanyahu. People said he would leave politics, but he hasn't. They said he would calm down after losing power, but he hasn't. What's his game plan, in your opinion? Will his corruption trial force him to remain in a political influential position? Does he truly believe he can come back? In other words, can you guess what's going through his head these days?
Well, you're a greater expert on Netanyahu than I am. So, I'd love to hear what you think. Personally, I think it's all about the trial. I think he has to figure out what's best for him. I know that he thought that staying in office as prime minister was the best tactics to go through this trial with minimum harm. And I think he has to come up with a strategy. Is it going to help him staying in the Knesset? I'm not sure it's the same answer. Maybe if he goes into trial, not as a political figure, it will be easier for the attorney general to try and kind of deal with him, for the judges to try and understand that he paid a political price for taking these charges. It's a different math when it comes to going into court, if you're a prime minister, or going to court if you're just a member of an opposition or a member of Knesset. But, I'm not sure where he's going, but I'm sure it has to do with a trial, and we have to see, what do you think? Is he here to stay? Is he going? I think we'll have to wait a couple of months to see.
I will do what the judges in the Supreme Court in Israel are doing. I agree to what my colleague has just said, because we can never know it right now. I think he doesn't know himself. He's playing it on a daily basis. He made a lot of mistakes. The exits, the opportunity, his opportunities to have a decent exit, I think is losing it. But in Israel, you can never know. I have to ask you in the final question about I think you touched in the first part of this conversation. How do you see the fact that this government has brought together the left and right, Bennett, Shaked, Saar, Elkin, on one hand, with Nitzan Horowitz, Merav Michaeli, Tamar Zandberg on the other hand? Is this a true change that signals increased tolerance and cooperation in the political map in Israel, or is the glue holding it all together is the burning hatred of Benjamin Netanyahu, which will melt once Netanyahu leaves the scene?
Well, I know that they are if someone is anxious that Netanyahu doesn't leave and stays on, it's those, the party members, and of course Naftali Bennett, because it's good for them. It's the best glue for them to stay together, because once Netanyahu leaves, then the political map will change and the Likud party will find a leader, and then it would be more natural for Gideon Saar and Bennett to come sit with the Likud than stay with this unusual partnership with all the left-wing members that you've just, leaders that you've just mentioned. But in the short term, I think that this government is very important for trying to take down the hatred, take down the diversity, the tension between the camps, to try and come up with something which is more calm. To hear Naftali Bennett say how he appreciates Merav Michaeli or Ayelet Shaked, his member from the Yamina party, talk about Nitzan Horowitz doing such a great job. It's things we couldn't think would be possible. And, it's a good example even for people on the street to take down tension and the political tension. We had 2 years of very fierce and ugly election cycles. But on the long term, we still have to face our existential issue, and that is, what kind of Israel do we want to see in 10 and 15 years or 20 years? And that we have then to answer that question, we must go through the Palestinian issue. What kind of country do we want to see here? Do we want to work to a one-state solution? Can a one-state solution work? Is it the last minute for a two-state solution? This problem is not going away, and this government is saying we're not going to deal with the Palestinian conflict, because obviously we can't come up with any kind of any kind of agreement with all these components around the table. So let's push that problem aside. Deal with economy, deal with COVID, deal with getting the political climate back to normal. But 2 years from now, 4 years from now, that problem is going to be on our table. It's just going to be more urgent to deal with it. So this government can't deal with the most basic question we have to ask ourselves. What kind of Israel do we want, and what kind of Israel can last and be a viable, strong state in this region?
So I will translate it and say it's a government that it is nice to have, but not must have. And this Palestinian issue that you're just talking about can even crash into us, not even in 4 years, but even in 4 days, because anything can happen in any time. And this
think it's a must. I think it's a must-have for the first stage. We don't know, maybe it will take us to a second stage with different understanding between the sides, because what you see from here is not what you see from the opposition. So maybe this is the first step to a new kind of political understanding, and maybe we're just kicking the can down the road.
And I like very much this optimistic finale in Sukkot. We say Chag Sameach, happy holidays. It was a fascinating talk. Dana Weiss, thank you for joining us here in Al Monitor. We'll take now a short break and come back with some final thoughts. Toda, Dana.
Toda.
I'm Andrew Parasolidi, president of the award-winning media news site Al Monitor, where we cover the Middle East with some of the best reporters and columnists anywhere. And I'm excited to announce our new podcast on the Middle East, where each week I will interview newsmakers from the U.S. and the region about the latest news and trends, with additional commentary from our on-the-ground correspondents. Those of you who follow the region know that what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East. And to cite another great movie line, every time the U.S. tries to get out, the region pulls us back. Your time is valuable, so let me promise you this. You will learn something and you will never be bored, because each week we'll be talking with and listening to those leaders who are making the news and shaping the trends in this critical and fascinating region. So please subscribe to On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Thank you for staying with us. According to Dana Weiss, the senior analyst and political correspondent of Channel 12 in Israel, the Bennett-Lapid government seems to be right here with us and not going anywhere. She told us that in the White House there were hesitations and people thought that it was better to postpone the meeting between President Biden and Naftali Bennett to after the approval of the state budget in the Knesset in November. But then finally they realized after checking that the budget will be approved and this government is probably here to stay. Talking about the coalition itself, Dana Weiss thinks that it can survive even a clash with Gaza. And she quoted the senior politician from Ram, the Muslim Brotherhood Party that is a crucial part of Bennett-Lapid's coalition, saying that we are not going to make any progress for our voters and our people if we will be outside. And it's about time for us not to take care on things that happens in Gaza or in the West Bank, but to take care of our people in the inside. And she mentioned people like Health Minister Nitzan Horowitz from Meretz and the Transportation Minister Merav Michaeli from Labor that never planned to be in coalition in the government as senior ministers, but only this coalition gave them the chance to do so. And this is actually the strength of the Bennett-Lapid coalition. When I asked her what is the secret of Naftali Bennett, he is a right-wing ideologist, a religious prime minister, and still leaders like President Biden, like King Abdullah from Jordan, and President al-Sisi from Egypt gave him so much respect. Contrary to what they gave Netanyahu lately. And she said that the starter is that the ABB, the famous ABB, anything but Bibi, that Bennett is not Netanyahu. And they all think that this government in Israel is a very interesting experiment. And actually, for example, the Americans are taking part in this experiment. We don't have any guarantee that it is going to succeed, but it's going on. And she defined these meetings between Bennett and Biden and Bennett and al-Sisi as endorsements of all these people to this young government. She said that what Israelis believed, many Israelis believed for many years, that it's either Netanyahu or the destruction of Israel, is now proven to be wrong, because Naftali Bennett is prime minister and he plays now in the International League and the score is not so bad and the sun is keeping shining or rising every day in the east. So everything is possible, and Bennett is not thinking about his base, his voter base. He's thinking about the state. And maybe this is a very good formula for this government to survive. I hope you found it interesting. And I'll see you here next time in On Israel, in Al Monitor. I'm Ben Caspit from Tel Aviv. Thank you and bye-bye.